All right. Well, thank you again. So my topic today is going to be around creating Power Automate flows for Dynamics 365 Business Central, or the product that was called Microsoft Dynamics Nav or Navision for a long time. Now I know this is this is a very specific or somewhat of a niche topic, but the reason I wanted to address this is there is a real issue with adoption of Power Automate and Power Apps within our ecosystem with Business Central users. And Business Central is a very, very popular ERP system for Microsoft across all small and medium companies and mid-market companies. It has many localizations across the world. It is available in many different languages, and so there is a very broad availability of Business Central partners and end users across the world. So I hope that there are some of those folks represented in this audience today, and that they would benefit from the presentation that I have. Once again, my name is AJ Ansari. It's actually Ajwad Ansari, but not a lot of people can say Ajwad in America, so I resorted to going by AJ many years ago. And so a little bit about me. I am one of the ownership partners and the chief operating officer at a Microsoft partner called DSWI. We're based here in Houston, Texas, and we have offices across the United States. You have my email address and my Twitter handle here, and my QR code for my LinkedIn profile. Now, if you go on my Twitter handle, you're more likely to find me talking about sports like Formula One or college football or so on, maybe, than you are to find me talking about technology. So if you want to hear more of my views on technology, follow me on LinkedIn, and I think there you'll see some of my prevailing interests. As I mentioned before, Dynamics 365 Business Central is the product or the app that I specialize in. My MVP recognition is actually for my work in that space. But over the years, I've found myself just as much, interested in and creating content around Microsoft Power BI because it's a natural addition to what we do with ERP systems. And then subsequently, when Microsoft announced its Power Platform applications like Flow, which is now Power Automate, and Power Apps, which I think at one time was called Project Sienna, those became of instant interest. And I would like to consider myself one of the early adopters, even if some of the things that I did not end up in production. And my goal was to be an evangelist and help people understand why, as a citizen developer, you can make a real impact within your business. And, I did spend some time creating content and speaking about these at conferences from, I think, as far back as 5 or 6 years ago. And more recently, I've found a great interest in Copilot Studio. As a matter of fact, this year I will be delivering workshops on Copilot Studio in at least 4 different cities across the world, from San Diego to Antwerp and I think in maybe in Denver, Colorado. I can't remember, and another one. So I've got various invitations landed up to present these sessions. And this particular session that I'm presenting today, variations of this session have also been accepted at various conferences. Now, outside of that technology focus, I love Formula One. Huge Formula One fan, and I've been to a few races. This is, in fact, from the race in 2019 in Austin, Texas, which was very close to, or actually 2021 in Austin, Texas, which is very close to where I live. And I took my daughter with me, and we had a lot of fun. This was turn 9. I regret I won't be there in Jeddah for today's Formula One Grand Prix, but I will be watching it on multiple screens. So on to our topic at hand. What I wanted to do is actually start off with a small survey. There is no personal identification information that I'm collecting here. I just want to understand the demographic of the people that are attending the session. So if you want to, and I'll give everybody 1 minute, you can scan this QR code with your phone. It's going to ask you a few very basic questions. And the questions are you a partner? Are you an end user? It's going to ask you if you have any experience with Power Automate. It's going to ask you if you have any experience with Business Central, and if your background is that of a functional person, a citizen developer, somebody who's technical developer, etc. So it helps me understand the demographic of the audience, but you will notice there is no collection of individual identification. So I won't know who you are, what your name is, what company you're at, what your email address, and so on are. So with that, I'll leave this up for just a second longer. This one response that you're seeing was actually, I was testing that just in advance. I forgot to flush this out. So All right. With respect to everybody, I understand that some people may not want to participate. So I think outside of myself, I was the one working with a partner in ISV. So we have an end user here. And I think we have, so I had multiple skills that I bring by background. And I think that the other individual may have contributed as well. I realized I did not speak to my skills. So I am by background somebody who came through the ranks as an implementer and then I became a developer out of necessity. I do not have any formal development training, but I did become a Business Central developer and later a citizen developer out of necessity. And then over the years, I was a practice director, and I was now I'm the chief operating officer, as I noted. So I think we have one more person who's answered that. So we have more end users than we do, and that's good. Some split of skills. I think across the board, most people have intermediate level skills. I would certainly not call myself the full expert in Power Automate, but I would say I'm probably on the higher intermediate side. I think we find that the people here are actually not very experienced with Business Central, but I think even if you're not, you'll find that there's a real opportunity for you to be able to, create some flows for the community. So let's go ahead and let's move on and talk about the prevailing challenges and why I think this session or sessions like these are needed. One of our bigger challenges is that a lot of the content of the community is quite basic. And what I mean by that is the bulk of the content that exists on Power Automate for Business Central is around the most simple scenario where we replace Business Central's own approval workflows with Power Automate approvals. And yes, there is value, but frankly, process automation is about more than just that. And there's so much more ground that we can address. And today, I will show you one scenario for sure, and then time permitting, I'll go into a second scenario as well. And both of these actually address real world business needs. That both of these are implemented and are being used actively today. The second issue that we find is that the Business Central connector that Microsoft has created has some limitations. Some are by design, and some are perhaps just a byproduct of the slow evolution and the various versions that Microsoft has had to create for these connectors. In fact, even right now, if you go and look in Power Automate and or Power Apps and you look at the connector, you will find there are two separate connectors. One for Business Central Online, which is a true SaaS version of the Dynamics 365 Business Central application, and the other one is for Business Central on premises. And that's because in the Business Central on premises world, the way you have to expose the environment and the way you expose data is a little bit different. But here in the Business Central Online world, where we'll focus, all of the connector capabilities are limited only to API support. For anybody who does or does not know, I'll still reiterate the fact that historically in Business Central and its predecessors, a lot of people created integrations with web service endpoints. These were based on REST OData protocol. And so you would have a secure connection where you would have a web service access key and a username that you would utilize to be able to connect and draw data out. More recently, Microsoft deprecated that both both for the reason of higher performance that you get with API pages and because Microsoft was not convinced it was very secure. And to help people along, they've created some APIs, but there's only 40 APIs out of the box that we're getting from Microsoft with Business Central. And they address simple scenarios like, some data from a sales invoice, some data from the customer table and the vendor table. But the reality is that in most cases, those do not address all the needs. In most cases, you might have a custom field that you've added to a customer table or a vendor table. You may have some custom tables with data that you want to be able to use in your automated flows and other integrations. And for those, what we find is that within the community that we have of Business Central, even developers, they don't always know how to work with APIs. I am quite surprised that I would say maybe about 30 to 40% of developers, traditional developers in the Business Central world, know how to work with the API side of things in Business Central. In most cases, they're still using legacy methods to integrate or using integration tool sets that are developed by third parties. So if I wanted to, and you will see in my first scenario, I'm going to be using a custom API. I need to know how to build it. So I can either put on my developer hat and I can make my API from scratch, which I've got an example to show you, or I can do the work smarter not harder route. And I will show you a couple of good tools. None of those are tools that are written by me. They're written by fellow Microsoft MVPs, and yes, they do charge for them. But what that can do is significantly lower the effort it takes you. And for full disclosure, I get no kickbacks. There's no financial gain to me for anyone going and utilizing this tool. You will notice there are no referral links that I have that will allow me to monetize or do any of that. That is not the intent of this session or any educational session. And then further within the knowledge gap space, what I'll mention too is anytime you're working with a business system, whether it is Dynamics 365 Business Central or Dynamics 365 customer engagement or any of the apps within it, there is a business logic aspect as well. There are some business rules and validation that may run. And these could be, these are traditionally called functions and procedures, or you may know them as bound actions or unbound actions, depending on what's going on. And so there's an even severe lack of knowledge within the Business Central developer community on how to use those with API pages. Just using those within the context of Business Central is quite prevalent. But when I have to expose a business layer and not just the data layer of Business Central, so if something happens, I want to feed back, I want to run, get back the error message, or create custom handling that respects and acts based on information I'm getting back from the ERP system. That type of knowledge is really not very high within our ecosystem. And so this has again been one reason for a kind of strong adoption, that whenever tough scenarios around integration are coming up, what we are finding is that people are opting to do custom development and custom integration instead of using automation with Power Automate. The other problem is who should be the user of Power Automate, who should be creating Power Automate flows. If you have a situation with, if you have a customer or you are a customer using Dynamics 365 Business Central, Microsoft presents all the Power Platform tools as the citizen developer tools, right? It's democratizing what we have and making it available for the masses. However, what we find, as I've stated with Knowledge Gap 1 and 2, that a lot of the work that is needed is probably not going to be available to the average citizen developer, those skills. In fact, they require developers or people with very strong technical skills. And because of that, I think customers have found themselves often unable to bridge that gap to actually do things. Even though they may have a business analyst on their side, they don't understand how to do it, and therefore they're not doing they're not using Power Automate as much. And my goal over the next year to 2 years as a Microsoft MVP, I'm sure Mohammed, maybe has shared this earlier too. We all choose an area of passion and focus, and then we want to create more and more content to help the community grow in that space. So my goal for this year and the next is to work and create more and more content that can help citizen developers bridge this gap that I've defined, these areas of gap. And so today is a small representation. Now, I think in sessions like these, I'm not going to be doing live coding. But I do actually, instead of having screenshots, I will actually pull up live environments so that if I do need to interact with them, I can. But in workshop formats, I often go through, I'll have a handout, I'll go through everything that I'm doing step by step, and you'll follow along. And then after the workshop is done, you'll also have access to my GitHub repository where you'll find much of my code. So our learning objectives for today, let's talk about that a little bit. I would like to make sure by the end of this session, you have an understanding of the Business Central connector for Power Automate. I'll show you a few things that are available as action triggers and as triggers, and then as the actions when you're working with Business Central connector. And I'll show you how what you need to select, the most important things when you're working, because there's the concept of the tenant, the environment, which traditionally I think we've seen as databases, and then within them a construct called a company, by which a multi entity organization, somebody who owns more than one company, may still have one subscription of Business Central, but they separate each legal entity out as a company. So how do we select those, and then more information related to it. Of course, I will focus a lot on how to tap into Business Central data not covered by the 40 standard APIs. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you a completed API. I will start the creation of a brand new API, but not actually bring it to completion, just to show you if you wanted to take the development route, the true development environment route, which can give you the most power. How do you do it? And then I'm also going to show you some search results in Microsoft App Source, and then specifically two apps that I have heard great reviews about, one that I've used, and I think it will cut down and really takes away the complexity of creating custom APIs. I will talk about use of variables. Now, for some of you who are traditional Power Automate users, creating variables is one of the more common things that you have to do. But I've got some interesting kind of use of how I'm getting some records and from Business Central that I want to show as well. And then in my scenario here, I'm using some conditions. Again, none of this is rocket science, but I think because we're talking about a boot camp type of environment here, I wanted to cater to both people who might know more and people who might know very little about Power Automate and are using this as the entry level. Now, I don't have this as a link, but I would strongly advise you to search for the Automate in a Day or Automation in a Day workshop. These are offered by partners for free across the world all year round. And but if you're not in a place where this course is being offered, Microsoft also makes a self-guided, kind of self-paced, self-guided instruction on how you can do everything in the Automation in a Day workshop yourself at your own pace. So if you need help finding it, at the end of the session, you'll have my QR code again. Just write me on LinkedIn and I'll send you both for Automation in a Day, App in a Day. If you're interested in Power BI, there's Dashboard in a Day. I talked about my passion for Copilot Studio. A lot of that was kind of, fired up by doing the Copilot Studio in a Day workshop and so on. So these in a day workshops are going to be a phenomenal place if you're not already at least at a scale of 1 to 10 on Power Automate. If you're not at least a 4 or 5, I absolutely encourage you to sit through those. I think it'll be to your benefit. So let's go. Let's start with our scenarios, and I'm going to take you through a quick walk down what's going on over here. So let's see if I have. Actually, I had one hidden slide I want to unhide, and before I go to the live demo. So I know there's more than 2 steps in general, and there's a lot more depth behind these 2 steps, but I wanted to explain what my first and my key scenario for today's presentation was, and what was the business need that drove this creation. So a lot of times when you're working with an ERP system, you also have some external systems that are feeding it data. Right, the ERP system is where all the data consolidates, and you're running your key business processes, and those business processes then drive the information that your business needs to create invoices, to collect money, to determine and run financial reports, or if you're an inventory driven business, to be able to calculate when you need more inventory to drive production and so on. In this particular case, the scenario is that we have a client in the medical field that provides some sort of this beds and type of equipment, and when something breaks, they have to send out a field service crew to these medical facilities to be able to fix these the items that have a problem. And the application they're using for field service will feed back data from the field service visit into Business Central. It drops it into a holding area, into a holding table, for lack of a better word, and periodically everything from that holding table gets converted into standard service tickets or service orders into in Dynamics 365 Business Central. And what they would notice is that periodically these order details that were coming from the mobile devices from the field visits, when they're dropping into the holding table, they were not converting. Sometimes they were failing. I think it was a matter of some of the data that they were collecting. Maybe the data types had issues, or there were some required fields that were not being properly collected, right? And so that gave us guidance to then make sure that we are creating a user experience whereby people can collect all the mandatory fields and everything else that's needed. But what more importantly, they needed to know when one of the field ticket details was dropped into Business Central but could not convert into a Business Central service order. And they needed to know this in a timely manner. So as soon as it fails, they should get a notification. And so this in Business Central, this process of kind of dropping something into a place and then converting it periodically, it's its own type of automation. We call it job queues. And so periodically I can schedule the running of a conversion code. Now, what's beautiful is in a perfect world, I can also use Power Automate to do some of this, but that's just the way Business Central Legacy users are typically doing it. So what we have to do here is we're first going to start off by creating a Business Central API for the page that or the area that we need to expose to Power Automate. Because in most cases, what Microsoft has created, it's not going to be sufficient. And so what we need to do, we need to identify the table that contains the desired data. So I'm going to show you, if you're new to Business Central or you're not a developer, how do you know, how can you identify that table so that you can create an API page for it? Then I'll show you in very simple ways how you can create and publish an API page. I want you to focus on certain properties as I show you my code. One is data access intent, one is OData key fields, and the API definition properties when we create our API page. And then of course we move on to create the automated flow, and we're going to use the Business Central connector. So with that, let's jump into my Business Central application. So if this is your first time looking at it, this is Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central. This is my private tenant that I use for my Microsoft MVP content creation. So this is not running live customer data. There's nothing real world here. There's just a testing environment. Now, as I mentioned, we have an area in Business Central where we track any kind of internal automation routines like conversion of certain things. Of course, instead of using that conversion, I just have a handful of sample things that I'm running as some conversion. So one is I'm periodically running an aged accounts receivable report. So this is one automation inside of Business Central. And I want to be notified by Microsoft Power Automate if this fails to run. Another is for if you are an inventory-driven organization, you might use MRP and MPS. If you don't know what that is, that's basically just inventory planning. And so I want to be able to periodically run an inventory planning function, even though it's called a report at the back end of it. It's basically a function that looks at all the inventory supply and demand equations and then determines what we need to buy based on replenishment details. So I want us to focus on these two lines. These two are the ones that I really want to get some work done on. But if I want to create an API page, one, I will tell you just for, to avoid any confusion, Microsoft did not cover this as one of the screens or one of the tables or pages that is exposed out of the box as an API. So if I want to do anything with this in Power Automate, can't do it. So what do I have to do? First, I need to understand what table this is coming from so I can come to over here and I could look at my page info. If you're not seeing it, and on some environments I find that it's not easily visible. Oops, wasn't trying to create F1. So you use the Alt Control F1 shortcut, and that brings up the page inspection tool. So when I'm looking at page inspection, right away I can tell that this data comes from the job queue entry table. And this is really important for me, the table identifier and the table name, because with this information, I can then go ahead and open our development tool, which is called Microsoft Visual Studio. And so Microsoft Visual Studio Code, rather. So that is what you need. And if you're going to be doing anything with AL, you will need to first make sure that you have the AL language extension involved. In most cases, if you are doing work with Business Central, you already have some of these tools. There is one other really neat tool that I utilize that can help me create some things faster, and that's the AZAL development tools. Coming back to my project area, I've got a whole bunch of things here in my project, but I'm going to focus on one specific page for this scenario, which is where I've extended or created an API page for the job queue entries or the job queue log entries. As a matter of fact, I made one mistake when I was showing you. I should have focused more on not the job queue page, but the page that reports errors in here, the log. So this is the screen I should have taken you to. This shows all the successes and all the failures that are happening with all the automations within Business Central, and I actually needed the table identifier for that. The job queue log entry is the name of the table, and that's table ID 474. So with that information, now when I go up here, what I did is I created an API page. And now this has been pre-created, this is fully done. But if you had to make a brand new API page, you would just simply right click and you'd say new file, or if you're using the AZAL DevTools, you would say new, and then you select that. And then from here, from a drop down, you would be able to do an API page. New AL page wizard. There you go. And then it will ask you what type of page you're creating, and you would select API, and then you would start to populate all of the properties. So I would say this is going to be my job queue, log entries API page for GBP, and so on, right? And then my source table, this is where I'm going to take that table's name that I saw, and then I would start publishing, including my API properties, publisher, the group, the version, and so on. But I've already got all of that done. So my finished product looks like this. Every page or everything that I create in Business Central has a unique identifier. And so this is the page identifier. Now, one thing I want for anybody wondering why am I not using table, in Business Central, the way the schema is set up is the tables actually contain the data, but anytime you want a representation, a visual artifact, or a representation of that data, whether it's in card form, a list form, or some other type of a form or an API form, you create a page. So a page essentially represents that data in a form that can be utilized, or in a form that has a user interface for people to interact with. So these are just some of the properties that I preset. The group and the publisher, this is my company's name, my API version number. And then obviously the goal is when you're creating your API, you're making a commitment that you're not going to keep changing this willy-nilly. So if you're making changes here, especially breaking changes in the future, you'll want to update the API version. So people relying on your API are not impacted. And then you have, as you move down, a couple of things. One is the data access intent. I want you to think hard before you actually do anything. What is the purpose of this API page? Is it only to pull data to use in a flow? Is it to pull data and to also accept data back to be written into Business Central? And we always want to make sure that we're only exposing enough to meet our business needs. So if there is no need to be writing data into Business Central back, in this case, we don't need it for our business flow. We just need notification when something fails. Let's make it read only. So we are closing out unnecessary windows that can allow a system to be compromised if your credentials are compromised. Second, extensible. And so this allows you to allow somebody else to further build on your API. Business Central is an extensible ERP system. So anytime somebody creates code, if they allow it to be extended, another developer can extend it even if they don't have access to your source code. So essentially, you're leaving room for them to say, there's this extension, I want to piggyback off of it and maybe add 2 more fields. So a scenario could be that here you've created this API. This API has the following fields: the status field, it'll show the user ID field, description, object type to run, and so on and so forth, all these things in green. And if they wanted to add 1 or 2 more fields, they would be able to add that as an extension without coming here and adding them inline to this code. Then the last thing I want you to focus on here is OData key fields. This is important to use in the Business Central world as shown. OData key fields equals system ID. You always want to use it this way. Even if you have a built-in primary key that you have defined for this particular table. The rest of it is pretty straightforward. And there are snippets in Business Central to do all of these, or when you use the AZAL wizard, if you had finished it, you would have pre-selected all of the fields you wanted to drop, and it would actually do 95% of the work. But still, let's assume for a second that you're not a developer and this intimidates you. What do you do then? I want you to try the following tools. So one of the tools that I want you to try is you go to App Source, and from your own search, you can type in appsource.microsoft.com, obviously. Type in API, and where you can filter on Dynamics 365 Business Central, and you'll find that there's actually a few different ones. Some are just for any type of custom API. Some are APIs that people have created themselves for use. But I want to draw your attention to two. One is called a Simple Object Designer. This is by a gentleman named Eric Hugart out of Canada. He's been a Microsoft MVP for the Nav and Business Central world for many years. What's really cool about what he's done is if you want to create an IP inside of the Business Central user interface, you can simply open the screen that allows you to create a custom API. You select the table you want to create it for, what the entity name and properties are, and then select the fields you need, and it can publish that. So it's going to do that in your environment without ever having to write a simple line of development. And then if you want to, you can also remove those APIs, and all of them happen very safely. And what's really cool too is if your development manager requires this to be baked into your project, it does allow for the code to be downloaded and incorporated into another Visual Studio project as well. An alternative that I want you to consider that I also like a lot is called Data Brader, and this is by Jeremy Viska, and he's a Microsoft MVP out of Sweden. Oh, Data Brader. Let's try this again. This company is called Spare Brained Ideas, and so this is a solution. This also allows you to create your own custom APIs. So in both of these cases, what they're trying to do is allow you to sidestep the need to use the development tool and focus more on just getting the outcomes you need. And I think this is going to be the true value that allows citizen developers to create more flows, because once you've created the flows, once you've created the API pages, the rest, if your Power BI Automate knowledge is strong, you should be able to do with great ease. So with that, now let's go into, we have the API, we've now published it. If I want to validate if my code is published or not in Business Central, once I've created this application, I can go and upload or publish this under extensions management. So there's an area where we can see all of our per tenant extensions, which is basically a fancy word for customizations to Business Central. So I've published the one that I was looking at here. Right in here, so I can see that this is available in my environment. This is how I know that my API page is available and usable. From here, I'm going to jump into Power Automate, and I have a my Power Automate flow. So let's just go ahead and leave the screen for a second. Now, when I'm working with my Power Automate flows, and if I were to create one from scratch here, in this particular case, I'm going with an automated cloud flow because it's going to be running automatically based on an event that happens in Business Central. So this is just to get things started, GPPP 24 and Saudi Arabia KSA. And then if I were to search from Business Central, you will find that there's going to be these dark green or dark turquoise type of icons or dark teal icons. And so this is for Business Central Online, when a business event occurs, when a record is deleted, when a record is changed, when a record is created, when a record is modified. So insert, modify, delete, and so on. And then you have, if I scroll down more, when document approvals are requested and so on, or item or other types of stuff approvals. And then if I go down further, let me see if I can just say Business Central on. So it does not want to show me the Business Central on-premises ones for whatever reason here, but you will find another one where the background in this icon is going to be lighter color and the icon itself is a darker color, and it will say Business Central on-prem. And so be sure that you're not selecting the on-prem connector, because that is a whole different animal, and you don't want to do that. So I wanted to highlight that. In fact, maybe if you go into a list of all the connections, and you create new. I think maybe here too you might be able to see the. As soon as I learn how to spell things, yeah. So you do not want to be using this one unless you are on premises. I wanted to specifically highlight this. This is where I was getting at. We want to be using this one. This is for the SaaS online version of Business Central. And I think the last presenter had talked about the CDX experience, where if you don't already have access to a testing environment, how you can get that. Within the CDX experience, not only can you get Microsoft 365 applications and Power Apps and Power Automate, but there's also an opportunity there to create a tenant that uses Business Central. So it will give you a trial environment of Business Central as well. So I encourage you to look at that if you haven't. Now, let's look at my flows. I've got a couple here. The one that I want to focus on in my scenario is the job queue entry notification, because this is where I want to know when something fails. So let's go and look at the flow that I've created and how I have got it working. The first is around, the first step is when a record is created, that is my trigger. And so I want to find, I want this to be triggered when the record for the job queue log entries is created, right? So when an error is noted there. So I've got over here the environment, which is my database and my tenant. Because Business Central is also part of the Microsoft Entra ID validated or signed in apps. As soon as I'm creating the connection and I'm signing in with the same Entra ID that I have for my M365 tenant, it should not need to be validated again. So it's looking over here in that tenant, and then my production environment, which is a lack of better word, a database, the company, and then the API category. Why it's so important to properly set your API version and category and so on is so that you can select from the list. And once you select this, you'd then be able to select your custom APIs that you've got published. So this is one of my APIs. The next step that I do over here is I want to get a record. Now, this is an optional field. Why did I do this? I want to, in my email result, be able to properly identify the company by its name in the email I send out to my users, or to whoever needs to know when something fails. So this is, I'm jumping the gun here in my workflow. When I have the email, I wanted to be able to send the company name. What I found is that without doing it, if I were to actually use the property around the company, that was not giving me what I was looking for. It was giving me a alphanumerical indicator of that company, and not what I was actually, the body company ID. It was more GUID than it was actually the user-friendly name of the company. So that's why I went in this step. Otherwise, if you don't need it, this step can be ignored. Then the next step that I took, this is where I'm actually getting the variables or the data from the job queue log entries. So all the fields that I'd exposed in here, the status, the user ID, the description, object ID to run, until I used this get record and kind of use this body row ID trigger outputs, I will not be able to use those in anything as I've progressed through my flow. So this is a very, very important step for you to do. And once I've gotten this, now I can look at my condition. So in this particular condition for this demo, I had to make a couple of limitations. But what was the business need here? Let me explain really quickly. The customer wanted to know when the job queue log entry had a record that resulted in an error. So it means a process failed. And then they wanted only to know this for certain processes. And in their business need, there were two critical processes. So what I have here is when status is error, when object type. So these are called reports, even though these are not your document style reports. It's just a object type for Business Central that allows us to loop through a lot of records. So object type is report. And even though in the verbal way I'm saying and, but these two plus if it's this report or this report. So this ID or this ID. Let's go back into Business Central, job queue log entries or job queue entries for a second. This or this. So in this whole list of things, automations that are running, I only want us to focus on things that have an error, and it's from this or this report. That's all I'm trying to establish here in the conditions I'm laying out. And when that happens, if these conditions are met, if there's something that's of status error, And if it's true, then we want to send out a quick email. And here we're using a traditional Outlook Office 365 email connector, and we're using all these different fields. So this is to inform you that if there's been a failure, and then using our effects here, we're just sorry, not the effects, the fields that we have, they're the data from the stuff that we've captured. We're using all the fields that we have here. We can pull what we need to and utilize them. And there are some additional parameters too that you can show and utilize. If you want to have who it goes from, the CC, BCC by default, it's going to send this as the authenticated user. I've also got my importance level. So this was just a very simple workflow. And then when I did my flow checker, everything works fine. There are no errors. And when it runs, I want this to obviously say success because the flow itself is successful, but I should get an email when it errors out. So in the interest of time, instead of waiting for it to run again, here's what you will see, that just before our session, what I'd done is like our session started at 6:30 a.m. my time. At 6:21, I ran this, and this particular one had run actually successfully well. This particular one, however, resulted in an error. And if I were to go to my queue details, I could see my job queue log entries. And if I filter on error, this one from 3/9, which is in the US, we write our month before we write our date. So March 9 at 6:21, we can see that this is the error message. You must decide what to calculate and so on. There's some parameters that maybe that we're missing. When I go to Outlook, I will find this is exactly what it will tell me. And this informs me that it failed, the company, the environment, the status, what failed, the start time and end time, what the error message was, and the GUID of the error message. So this was just a quick way for me to show a scenario like this. Mohammed, do I have more time? I remember I think I had up to 90 minutes. Advise me. If there is more time, I'll show another example a little quicker, but if not, I can start wrapping up.
Yes, please. We have buffer for time. You can go ahead.
Okay. All right. So what we did, if I want to summarize here, right, go back, is we wanted to be notified when there was a failure of a business process in Business Central. So it was a very simple one, just a small trait. The next one that I want to show is somewhat similar, but this involves a use case for my own organization. So let's leave the screen. And I don't have any slides for this from PowerPoint, so I'm going to walk you through what we have done here. So let's go back into and bring up another Microsoft Edge browser window. So I have a lot of different environments that I work in. This particular one is an educational environment for my company DSWI. We also use this to test and sandbox things before we publish them into a production environment. Now, one of the reasons I want to show you this particular flow is how we then took an alternate version of this and did something really fun and fancy. So what's a use case here? Let's start with that. If you're a Microsoft partner like us, you are probably a professional services organization. We are one. Our product is our time. We sell Business Central and Office 365 and Microsoft 365, Power, and so on licenses, but those are a very small drop in the bucket of how our business recognizes revenue. The most of our revenues come from our time from the time that our consultants, our support team members, our implementers, and our project managers do. So it is then so important that we're capturing time on a timely basis, that our users are using time reports. We don't just clock in and clock out. Our people need to put in the time entry that then gets converted into lines on an invoice that go to the customer, and the customer reads these invoice lines and they make payments when they agree that this work has been done. So this is so key, but unfortunately, I don't know how this is, for most of you, but in my life experience, I've found one old proverb to be particularly true, and that is the cobbler or the shoemaker's children are usually the ones who are wearing the torn and the tattered shoes. And it is true because we're so focused on helping everybody that we don't always do the best processes we should. And I would find, and our team would find, that sometimes our best consultants were the worst at time entry. They were not getting their time in on time, and so our billing would get delayed by days, or worse, God forbid, sometimes by even over a week. And we had to arrest this problem. So what we did is we wanted to go and say, we want everybody to enter their time no later than 10 a.m. local time on Monday. And that is for all the time that happened the week prior. For us, we count our business week from Monday to Sunday. Monday is our first day of the week. Friday is the official last day of the week, but Saturday and Sunday too, sometimes if there's an emergency or consultants might do work. So that is all falling under that week. So we expect on Monday at 10 a.m., all employees should have your time for the preceding week completely done. That is a use case. So what we are using in Business Central is we're using timesheets. And so you could take this type of an application and apply it to whatever business system you're using if it's not Business Central. And this is a demonstration environment. So I've got some things like for Terry and for Marty. These are two people in my company who can use timesheets, and this is an example of what the timesheet can look like. It can show by who did the work and what job they worked on or what project they worked on, what day and the hours and so on. So this is a timesheet of sorts. And then the other thing that we have is for Terry and Marty, in our Business Central environment, we have a card called Resource. And so in any business system, if it's a customer, that data goes in a customer table. If it's a vendor, you would define those records in a vendor table. If you have employees, it goes into an employee table. That's for the human resources side, and so on. But if you have employees, not every employee is going to be doing timesheets or is billable. So you take the employees who you can monetize and you put them into resources. So maybe this is stuff that you all know that I'm just repeating, but I wanted to understand why I'm looking at resources and not employee. And so these are some resources that I have. And I can say for Marty, if we take a look at his card, Marty is enabled for the timesheet. This is his manager for a timesheet, kind of who's managers and so on and so forth. And we have his billable rate and all that good stuff. But then what we also did is we created a custom field that allows us, I believe, where did we deploy that field? Show more. I'll have to, I believe it was on the screen, but regardless, what we've done is we added a field that allows us to say that we at least expect Marty to have X number of hours entered regularly on his timesheet each week. And so it might be 35 hours or 38 hours or 40 hours, whatever your expectation is. We've created a custom field. I think maybe somebody else from my team has removed that one, so I'm not seeing it. And that's just fine. And so once that is filled out for all of my employees in my live environment, it shows every person and how many hours I expect them to have on their timesheet at least. This is not a qualitative assessment if this is good time or bad time. I just wanted to keep things simple and be notified when people have not entered 40 hours, because usually they enter 1 or 2 days and then they get busy and they're not doing the work we expect them to. So we incorporated that, and then we needed to expose this information into API pages. So again, what we did is we created some API pages, and one of those was to extend the resource. First, if you know anything about Business Central, if I have to add a custom field, I need to extend the standard table that I want to add the field to. So the standard table is resource, and so I created an extension that allowed me to add two fields to the resource table. One is called the timesheet hours required. This is where we're going to note how many hours we expect on your timesheet, and this is our checkpoint. And then also an email address. I wanted to have that, and I wanted to pull the email address from your employee record in Business Central. So we don't have to type it in because I need somewhere to be able to email them. And then the other thing that we also did is around the timesheets, we wanted to see how many hours is required. We wanted to see quickly on the timesheet as well. So we added the same field that we had in the resource card. We wanted to flow from the resource card and show up here. And then we made an API page for the timesheets. So this is what allows Power Automate to then check if people have done this or not. So every week when Power Automate's flow is going to run, it is going to check using this API. It will pull everybody's timesheet detail and then see. So I'm checking the starting date of the week, the ending date of the week, the description, who the person is, what their name is, and what the quantity of hours they've submitted is, and so on and so forth, and how much the timesheet required is. So these are some highlighted fields. I did select a few fields that are surplus to my needs. In a perfect world, really, you're advised to only take the fields you need for your API to work, unless you're creating for generic use, a library of APIs. So these were the APIs I created, and then I jumped back into my Power Automate. And so let's go into my flows, and I'll show you two different flows. The first one was the automated timesheet reminder, and this is what is actually implemented in my own business. And this, along with the bonus structure, actually has completely eliminated timesheet delay issues in 2024. We're now 3 months into 2024. Only one team member, 1 week, was late on getting their time entry. And between this flow and a bonus that we started giving people, a very small bonus, but a bonus, that completely resolved our timesheet issues that we've had for years at end. So this is based on a recurrence. It's automated, but it is recurring. So I've got a recurrency for this, 1 week, the time it's going to run. Now, in this case, it accepted my time just as I've typed it, but I'm seeing whenever I'm creating flows now, I actually have to give it, this is a date and time field, so it may not accept it just as 10. When you want it to run, so I'm running this every Monday at 10 o'clock and 1 minute, so 10:01 a.m. So I want to give them 1 minute extra, and then I'm checking if the work has been done. So my trigger point is my recurrence. That's the first connector. And then I'm using a find records. You can ignore the issue here. This because I'm not actually going to run this. This was a testing environment. I have it plugged to a sandbox where I'm connecting to my timesheets API. And then I'm subtracting the time. So what I was doing, and this is very rudimentary, somebody I think went in and played with it. The goal is that this is going to run every Monday, and I wanted to look for what happened on the timesheet that starts the previous Monday. In Business Central, when I'm working with timesheets, every timesheet has a period, and we typically create timesheets for each week. So there is a starting date on the timesheet and an ending date on the timesheet, and you'll see it's usually for 1 week at a time. So when I wanted to, in a production environment, run, I wanted to start looking for things that happened 7 days ago, because I'm running this on Monday at 10:01 a.m. I wanted to check the timesheet that started exactly 1 Monday ago. So to do that, first I'm initializing a variable called, that allows me to subtract from time and go back 7 days. So this initialized variable will use what I've done over here, right? And then I've got another one called an overdue timesheet count. This simply is to allow me to see how many employees were late on their timesheet. So when it sends an email, it can notify those people, and they can send me a notification that says 5 people were late on the timesheet entry. So again, going back here, this was a subtract from time. And then I used the variable here that allowed me to calculate my the 7 days calculation. So let's go back. And then for each, this is where I'm just kind of starting my process. I'm doing a loop, right? Repeat until, or for each, for each record that it finds on the timesheet, it's going to get the record details. And then it'll look at the certain conditions, look at the date for the starting period, only choose the records for exactly 1 week ago, and only show me the timesheets that have less hours than the amount that I expect them to do, than the timesheet hours required. So if they have entered more hours, then I don't care about it. Or if it's for a timesheet from a different period, from a future period, sometimes we open up timesheets in advance. We don't want to look at those. So this is only for last week's timesheets that they have not met the number of hours we expect them to do. And then once we find those conditions, if they're true, sorry, I've got this dry cough from when I fell ill last week. That's bothering me a little bit. We're then sending an email to the employee. and the employee gets an email like this. It says overdue timesheet, and it shows them the starting date and the end date of the period. And it says, dear whoever it is, that individual, your timesheet for this does not have the requisite number of hours. At this time, only this many hours have been entered. We require that you at least have this many more, and so on. So we're doing this, and we're sending them an email. But then what we are also doing is, for myself, I also want to make sure that I have a count. So once we do this, we're adding one to our account. So now I know one employee got this, right? So if one time we found this condition to be true, it sends an email and says, we got one employee with this problem. And at the end, it's just sending me a mobile notification in the Power Automate app. It could have been an email too, but I decided just to use this as a difference. It says power process completed. This many employees had overdue timesheets. So this was perfectly perfect, and we executed this. This actually works for us quite well. Let me see if I can go into outlook.office.com and show you a sample email if I can. Because this is a testing environment, sometimes other people from my organization might actually go in and remove it. Let me just search by overdue timesheet, I think, if I had to. So something like this, was an email that got sent by Power Automate. So in my sent folder, I can see, you had to at least submit 37. You have submitted 0, and this had a high priority or high importance. Now, here's what's really cool that we did afterwards. We said, what if on Tuesday we want to check again those people who did not do their timesheet? What if they still haven't done their timesheet on Tuesday? We want to send another reminder, but we don't want to keep finding all these people individually. So what do? And so if you notice within Microsoft's Power Automate, there are other ways of running flows, and one is by an action, right? So when I do it, it's a instant cloud flow, so triggered manually as it's needed. So we have an instant cloud flow, and this instant cloud flow is a manual timesheet reminder. So the person who needs to is going to be able to open Power Automate, the app, and then they would be able to push that instant Cloudflow button, and then trigger the same flow. And this time it would check back to see who else is still has not done the work. But what we found is we were not really using this as much, because I have to launch my Power Automate app. I have to find the flow that I want to run. Then I have to go to that flow, and then I have to push the manual trigger button. It's 2 or 3 steps, and when I'm in a hurry, I don't always remember to do that. And that's where we came across a really nice technology. I'm sure they're not the only one, but this is pretty cool. You can buy it directly from the manufacturer. The company is called Flick, or you can buy it from Amazon. And you can buy them just by the buttons for like about $40, or you can buy the whole hub. If you have the hub will actually require the buttons to not be connected to a mobile device. It will just talk directly to the hub, and the hub is connected to the internet. And or if you just buy one button at a time, which they also sell, and they come in a lot of different types of buttons. So if you just buy 1 or 2 buttons, what's really cool is they can connect by Bluetooth to your phone. And so I have one of these type pack, $30 for 1 or 80 for 3. Again, I stand to gain nothing. So this is not advertising that will make me any revenue. This is just promoting cool technology. What's nice about these buttons, they're really small. They're probably the size of, kind of if you make a round circle between your finger and your index finger and your thumb, that's about the size of it. And you can stick it to your table, and it has 3 actions it can do. One is a single click, that can be one action or run one Power Automate flow. Another is a double click, and the third is click and hold. So this individual button can do 3 different things, and as long as it's close enough to a device that connects it to the internet, it can run. So we have another flow that we created that runs off of the Flick. And so if I'm at my desk before lunch on Tuesday or Wednesday, I decide, I wonder if these people have, the ones who did not do it, have done their work or not. Have they done their timesheet or not? All I do is I just click a button, and then it will find this particular flick is what it's listening for. Or in the case here, I said double click was my event, and then it runs my same flow. And by running the same flow, it is doing the exact same thing, except now it's not automated, and it will still send another email. The email can be a little bit different, but this is triggered by humans. And what I've realized is these buttons, if you start implementing them in different scenarios, it can be very helpful. I remember many years ago, Amazon had, maybe I don't know how popular it is in Saudi Arabia, but in the US, Amazon had these reorder buttons. If you ran out of Tide or Clorox or something, you're in your laundry room, you just go push that button and it would add it to the cart. It's a similar concept. It's an Internet of Things device, an IoT device, which can really simplify your life. So those are a couple of examples I wanted to share with you. I hope these examples have added some value, both from the Business Central perspective and maybe even showed you a thing or two in Power Automate that you did not know. If you have any questions, I'm going to open that up. But before I do, I want to bring up the survey slide, thank sponsors, and I also once again want to bring my QR code and my contact information so that you can reach out to me with any questions.